Hi, today we want to cover chapter 7 files and exceptions. I think most of you guys know about the files IO. We're just going to do it in Python. It shouldn't be too hard to do that. And then I would have another lecture, and we're going to be working on reading the files in different formats. So today we're going to be focusing on text files. So we're going to be reading and writing text files. And then next week, we're going to move on to the binary files, web pages, CSV files, and different formats of the files. So how are we going to write to the file? How are we going to read the file? How are we going to get the data? We are going to be talking about the command line. Always, there are some students who want to use that. Usually, if you work on the server side, you're going to need that. We're going to go over it, and then we see what we're going to do. And of course, we're going to talk about the exceptions. So we are going to be talking about text files right now. So we're going to be reading and writing to a text file, reading from it. So when we want to, let me get this going. So when we want to read from a file, we're going to open it for reading. So we're going to open it for reading. That's the way we're going to open a file for reading. So when we are opening the file, it has to be there. Otherwise, we're going to get exception, and we're going to figure out how we're going to handle the exceptions. If the file is not there, we cannot do anything about it. And when we use the open function, it's going to open the file, and it's going to be on top of the file. Let's start reading the file. When we want to do for writing, we're going to be using W. So we're going to have open with the W for a writing. So this is going to be open for a writing. When we're done with the files, we should close them. When the program is done, usually Python has garbage collector goes out there and does some stuff for us. But if you don't close it, there is a chance of there are some stuff that was supposed to be written to the file or not that could potentially damage the file. So that's the format. We're going to open for reading, open for writing, and we're going to have a close and close. And that's what we're going to be reading and writing. So generally, when we're reading the file I/O is the slowest thing that our program can do. So a typical way of doing it is to open a file, read the file into memory, which would be a list or something similar to that one. And then we're going to be processing it from the list. So remember, list and data structures like that are sitting in the memory, so it's a much faster access than the file itself. So we can read a line just using the file handler that we open. We can call the method of a read line that belongs to that, and that we can be reading the whole line. And it's going to stop at \n at the end of the line, and it's going to return a string for the whole line. And now we got to process that line. That's one way of doing it. So one way of going through the whole file is to read a line, and if that is not empty, we're going to keep reading it. So this is a regular structure of a while loop that we're going to create. We're going to do something before the while loop, and then we're going to stay in here while we have that. So we're going to read a line, and the empty line is going to be the last line that we have in the file. So when we get to the end of the file, it's going to return the empty string or null string for us. So even if you have a single line with no data on it, it's not going to be null. It's going to be it's going to have a data in it. So the empty string is for the end of the file. So because we're getting it as a string, we should format it or typecast it to the different format. And you have done this before when you're getting your input from the user. You can change it to float or int. When we're going to be writing to a file, we're just going to be using the word write, and we're going to write it as a string. We can use the printf format that you had for formatting your output. The same format, we can use it over here to write the mixture of numbers and the string. So we're going to be using %d for integer or digit or whatever we want to call it. Then we would have the f for float or decimal point, and we can have s for a string, or we just print it over here. And that's the way we're going to be writing. So if you remember, you had the printf that you were formatting your stuff. That's the same uh, format that you can use over here. Excuse me. So when we are writing to a file, we have to consider that if this file is for human use or for computer use. So if it's for human use, we need to add some user-friendly stuff in there. So we might have headers uh, for it. If we have columns, we want to push it into the columns, and each column should have its own header. Then at the end, you might have some extra lines and some wording for it. But if this is for computer, we don't want to put this extra stuff for the data. So if it's a data file, we usually indicate it with the .dat, that would not have this extra wording in it. It would just be a data. But if it's for human use, we need to put some, excuse me, we need to put some extra wording to make it more user-friendly. So there are some example in the book that you can look at it to see how does it look like. So remember the backslash is a special character that is for Python, C++, Java, all over the place. The backslash is a special character. So when the compiler goes through your code, as soon as it sees the backslash, it says, okay, after that, it's going to be a character, and I'm going to map it to some a special character or escape character. So we have backslash n, backslash t, backslash, the things that we have, we can use it, and those are a special character. And so for that, backslash is actually the backslash. So when I have two backslash, that is going to translate to backslash. So if I put only one backslash, it's going to take that the next character, a combination of next character, and this one is a special character. If I put two of them, it's going to treat it as a backslash. So for PC, you might have a absolute path that's going to be using a backslash. So for that, we have to use two backslashes, not one. But these types of using absolute path is not a good way of doing it, because when you send it to somebody, they don't have it in the same directory and they cannot find it. So we are using a relative path. So you can create a directory in the current directory that your file is executing, and you can start from there and go down. And that would be one way of doing it. In Linux and in Mac, they use // That's going to start from current directory, go down. You can do that for this one. I mean, for us, for the simple things that we are doing, you can put it in the same directory, but in general, you don't put your data file in the same directory that you would put it in your executable file, but you would have some path that you would map to it. So all the data file is in a database directory somewhere or some repository directory somewhere. So those are going to be created for you. So you can just use the path. You can put the path in your computer. You can actually modify it, add it to the path. So you can have that. But for our purposes, we're just going to put the file next to our executable so we don't have to worry about this too much. So we open a file. Now we read one line. Now we're going to use some tools that's available in Python to parse our line. So few things that we're going to do. One is we're going to get rid of the extra space at the beginning, at the end of the line. And we have something called split. So we have R split, we have L split, and we have a split. So we're basically going to be splitting. We can have a character here, and we can say split it based on that character. So I can say, for example, in CSV files, we're going to look at it next week. We're going to split it based on the comma. I think we did some exercise on that before. So a split is going to do that for you. If you don't put anything, it's going to be based on the space. So it's going to be splitting it based on the space. So we can read one line and split it between words. We can read sometimes one character at a time. We can read one line and go parse it as a character. We can read the whole file. So we have different ways of doing this. So we have functions available, and that's what that's why Python is getting popular, because it has these functions to make it user-friendly. So strip is going to take the extra stuff from the beginning and the end of the line. A split is going to be breaking it down to words. And remember, even if you break it down, you might have some extra spaces around it. And of course, the read is going to read the whole thing. So one way of doing it is we can do the for loop. So we can say for line in file and so it's going to get every line, we can process it. That's the one way of doing it. Okay, so when we're reading a line, it's going to have a \n at the end of it. So we need to get rid of it. And if you have some extra spaces or extra stuff at the end, we want to get rid of it. So that's when we are going to be using a strip. So if I use R strip, it's going to strip on the right side. If I use L strip, it's going to do it on the left side. And if I just use a strip, it's going to do it on both sides. So that's what the strip is about. So we have L strip, we have R strip, and we have a strip. I just use a strip for all of them. So in case I have something extra at the beginning of a line, I'm going to get rid of it. So that would be white spaces. White spaces are blanks, tabs, and Newline. So it's going to get rid of those things at the beginning and the end of the line. So these are some practices or examples that your book has. It's not a bad idea to go over it. So if I read a line and I have a \n at the end, and I do a R strip, it's just going to get rid of that \n for me. But if I have a space and \n, and I use the R strip, it's not only going to get rid of the \n, it's going to get rid of the space too. So white spaces, \n, space, tab is going to get rid of it. Now, if I specify what I want to do the strip on, it's just going to strip on that one. So if I say R strip \n, it's only going to get rid of the \n. So the default is white spaces, including \n. And if I mention something, that's going to be doing that. So if I put \n, it's just going to get rid of this one, but it doesn't get rid of our space over here. So strip is going to strip the beginning at the end. Sometimes my lines might have some spaces at the beginning. I just use the strip to get rid of both of them. ls strip is going to just do the left side. So we're going to read one line. We're going to strip the line, and then we're going to do the split. So it's going to take all the words separate. So as I said before, Python uses the list for everything, and this is one example of that. And that's going to create a list and going to return it. If I don't put anything on a split, it's going to split it based on spaces. So we can put multiple things in there. So for example, if I put R strip and I put these things, period, comma, question mark, and this sign over here, exclamation. So it's going to get rid of those things. So you might have something at the end of the line or even in the middle of the line or something. I might put a semicolon in there or something that I want to get rid of it. So if I am parsing at C++ programming, maybe I put the semicolon in there because we have semicolon all over the place. So this is a complete example. We're going to open this file for reading. We're going to go to each line. We're going to get the right strip. We're going to clean up the right side of it. We're going to split it based on the white spaces. And then we're going to go for the word inside. Remember, this is going to return me a list of words in there. So we can go through each word and get rid of some extra stuff that they have, some punctuation. And now I'm going to have my word. So we have a split with a separator, and we can have a separator with a max split. So that's going to do this maximum of it. We can go up to this maximum. And again, some example over here. I can split it with comma, and the CSV is a comma separator file that if you have Excel and you save it as a CSV, which is a very, very common way of doing things in industry. So the Excel is translated to a text file with a comma separator, so I can split it based on the comma. So I read one line and split it based on the comma. If I don't mention anything, it's going to be based on white spaces. So 2 space, 1 space, 3 space, doesn't matter. It's going to separate it. But if I specifically mention the space, so this is going to give us an extra one in the middle. Because if we have a space over here and I have 2 spaces, it's going to give us a one extra one. So if I say split colon 2, it's going to do 2. So that's 1, 2. It's going to create 2 of them. That would be my maximum. So remember, if I don't say anything, it's going to give me 3 of them. If I put a number, it's going to just give me that many numbers. This is for a split. And if I say R split, it's going to go from the right side. So it's going to give me 2 from the right to left. So if I want to read, if I'm interested of reading one character at a time, Remember, we don't have character per se in Python. So what we're going to do, we're going to be using one for string, and that's going to give us the length of it. So that's going to give us one character. So if I want to process the characters in the file, I'm just going to check to be sure it's not null, and I'm just going to keep reading one character at a time. Reading records, this is something that it is useful for us to do, and I want you guys practice tuple as much as possible. I don't think we are practicing it enough, looking at your homework and labs and those kind of things. So we want to use the tuple. We can use tuple for reading records. So we have our records separated in different ways. So we could have potentially a record be a name and population. So we can have name, number, name, number, name, number. So in this case, I'm going to read one line for the name, one line for the number, and I'll be okay. But if they are in the same line, or they are separated, they can be potentially separated with a colon or semicolon or something. So that's one way of having the file. So I have to know what's the format of my file. And then, of course, we're going to learn about the exceptions of how we're going to handle the exceptions in these things. But if we have the fields like this, then we're going to have a problem because we might have a name that has more than one word, maybe two, three of them, maybe one word, and then it's going to be a little bit confusing. So one way of handling this is if I know that the number is at the end, I can do the R split with one. So I would split it this way. So I'm going to go this way. I'm going to R split it this way. That's one way of doing it. Another way is if I read it as a line, I can just parse my line, and I'm going to be looking for a digit. So I am looking at a digit. So as soon as I find my digit, I'm going to split it based on the location that I have. So remember, I have a list. So I am going through my line, and I'm looking for a digit. So as far as it's not the digit, I'm just going to keep going. As soon as I see a digit, I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to get from the 0 to I minus 1 for the first part. And then I'm going to get the I to the end. That would be my second part. So if I read it like this, I'm starting from here. I'm looking for a digit. As soon as I get a digit, I'm going to stop. That would be my I. So that's where I'm going to get 14 to the end, and 14, 1 minus 1 to here. And then, of course, I got to do my strip to get rid of the space. So for file operation, we have open, close, read line, read, and read. Next one is about the command line. We do have this in all three languages, Python, Java, and C++. So we can do this in the command line. I think we should do at least one practice on this. So when we are looking at a file, and then we want to execute it, right now you're using your IDE and you run your program in IDE. But if you run it on the command line, you're going to be using the word Python and then the name of the program. And then we're going to have our arguments. So our arguments, we have an argument list, and that's going to go into the argument list. So The argument argv0 is my program name. The second one is this one. So this is my 0, this is my 1, and this is my 2. So that's the way it's going to come to my program. So if I'm looking at my program, well, let me be sure we understand this. So I generally, we have a flag like -v, -e, or something like that. So we would look at it. I think a good example is the decoding and encoding. So we're gonna do some exercises on those, but take a look at that to see how does this work. Again, this is available in all languages that we have for computer science. So you see Python and Java, they handle it a little different than C++, but they have the same concept. So we're going to use this 6-step to processing text files for our make a note of this so I can put it over there. So this is the way we're going to be processing our text file. So this is going to be your design document for processing your text file. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. You're going to go through this with your exercises. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to come back and do the exception handling.